Sometimes in Yu-Gi-Oh! It feels like even the most invincible of boss monsters are susceptible to current board breakers and extra deck tools, which is why you might be tempted to give them a new set of armor. So here's how the Armored Xyz engine works. In order to access the Armored Xyz package, all you need to do is summon out any rank 3 or rank 4 in the game. But if you can make a rank 3, it's a good idea to summon out Xyz Armor Torpedo to draw a card for free by detaching 2 materials. Then you can overlay Xyz Armor Fortress on top of Torpedo or any of your rank 3 or 4 Xyz monsters, and use its effect to detach its only material to add a full Armored Xyz from your deck to your hand. After that, it's just a simple matter of setting full Armor Xyz and passing turn to your opponent. This seems pretty mediocre at first, but by using the on-field effect of full Armor Xyz, you can rank them into full Armored Dark Knight Lancer during your opponent's turn, which will also put full Armored Xyz into your graveyard. Then, whenever your opponent summons out a potential combo piece or even a threatening boss monster, you can use the graveyard effect of full Armor Xyz as a quick effect to equip Dark Lancer with an Xyz monster from your field or graveyard. This does a lot all at once. Now your Dark Lancer is going to be gaining a ton of attack points, and will even be protected from destruction once. And if you equip an Xyz Armor Torpedo specifically, it also can't be targeted by card effects and will even prevent your opponent from activating anything during a battle with your Lancer. But by far the most important aspect of this effect is that Dark Knight Lancer gets equipped with something, which gives you the chance to use its effect to attach any one of your opponent's monsters to it as an Xyz material. So by summoning a single rank 3, you get a draw, an untargetable beat stick with a crazy amount of attack points, and a non-targeting, non-destructive form removal for one of your opponent's monsters that you can trigger during your opponent's turn. Now, as an enjoyer of World of Warcraft will tell you, building a whole new set of armor can feel like a big commitment. But that actually isn't the case for the Armored Xyz package, as you can have a pretty effective side engine with just 3 cards. You always want to be playing at least one Dark Knight Lancer, since it's the engine's main payoff, and the monster you'll probably summon out with the effect of full Armor Xyz. Likewise, Full Armored is also a mandatory card, as it's your best way of triggering Dark Knight Lancer during your opponent's turn. As a result, you'll always need at least a copy if you want your engine to be worth it. And last but not least, Xyz Armor Fortress is responsible for the engine's consistency, since it's easy to bring out, has the perfect rank to overlay Dark Lancer on top of, and even searches for your Armored Xyz cards, making it your main way of grabbing full armored. For some strategies, these 3 cards will be all you ever need to make this engine deadly, since Armor Fortress can be summoned out on top of any rank 3 or rank 4 monster in the game. However, because Fortress can't be used as a material for an Xyz summon while it has material, that can sometimes complicate things if you're struggling to get the materials off of your Xyz, which is why some decks are willing to slightly expand the package with a couple of other options. One of those choices is the titular spell card of the archetype, Armored Xyz. Now, compared to a full Armored Xyz isn't that great, but it can be worth it at 1 copy as an extra for Fortress to search, which lets you detach 2 materials at once rather than just 1. Alternatively, if you don't want to add more main deck bricks, your deck is particularly fond of making rank 3s, it's a good idea to play a copy of Xyz Armor Torpedo in your extra deck because its effect detaches 2 materials, making it so Armor Fortress will only have 1 by the time you summon it, which you can detach to search your trap card. Now that just about does it for the engine that most strategies are willing to play. Although you could theoretically play an even more expansive package by including a copy of Full Armored Black Ray Lancer, a copy of Full Armored Crystal Zero Lancer, and even a copy of Full Armor Utopic Ray Lancer. These cards aren't mandatory in more generic engines, but in Shark strategies taking advantage of the Armor engine, each of these extra deck options are perfect additions to the package. The engine doesn't stop there though, as we actually have 2 more armor cards on the way to the TCG. Armored Shark is a new and interesting search target for Fortress that gives Sharks an alternative way of utilizing the engine, but even if you do play it, its searchability means you only need 1 copy at most. Meanwhile, Reincarnate Unveil Mail can be used as replacement for Armored Xyz and Shark strategies. Both cards have their uses, but you're only ever going to play one or the other, and Sharks usually prefer Unveil Mail. The only piece of the Armored engine that doesn't see any kind of play is Xyz Entrust, because while it can grab any card from the archetype, you already have Fortress to grab everything you can need, so it's not worth it unless some really busted armor cards get released. Now let's equip ourselves with some knowledge by looking into how each of these armor pieces slot together. Each of the engine's Xyz monsters do a lot of different things, but the common feature between most of them is that they're all really easy to get to the field thanks to their alternative summoning conditions, which allow you to bring them out on top of one another. So in theory, you could go from a rank 3 Armor Torpedo, overlay into a rank 4 Full Armor Black Ray Lancer, Summon out the rank 5 Fortress on top, detach a couple of materials, then go for the rank 6 Full Armor Crystal Zero Lancer, and last but not least, you can then summon out the rank 7 Dark Knight Lancer, all without any kind of rank up magic. These alternative summon conditions make the engine run like clockwork, since you get these toolbox options through other Xyz so long as they have the appropriate rank. But usually, the end of the chain will always be Full Armor Dark Knight Lancer, and for good reason, as each of its effects are all stellar in their own right. Lancer already stands at an impressive 2800 attack, but grows even stronger with every Xyz material and equip card that's on it, allowing its attack to reach well above even the strongest of boss monsters. And its effect to add back a card with Xyz in its name from your graveyard gives Lancer some really powerful recursion in decks playing a bigger armored package, or decks tacking in certain options. But it's close to being busted in Sharks, as you can use this effect to add back an Xyz Remora, a combo piece that can summon out 2 level 4 fish monsters from your graveyard when summoned by its own condition. So usually in Sharks, you use the effect of Buzzsaw to summon out Remora from your deck to start your combo with a rank 4, and then after summon out Lancer later in the turn, you can add Remora back to your hand to use its mini soul charge and extend even further. But it's Lancer's third effect that really makes it so valuable for a whole host of different strategies. Because on a soft once per turn, if any monster you control becomes equipped with a card, you get to attach a monster your opponent controls to Lancer as an Xyz material. This effect is an incredible removal tool when paired with Armored Xyz, Unveil Mail, or any other equipped cards. But it gets even more impressive when it becomes interaction paired with Full Armored Xyz or Armored Shark, which can equip a card to your Lancer as a quick effect. This makes it incredible for dealing with whatever your opponent throws at you, especially because this effect doesn't target and dodges most kinds of protection that a card can have, which makes Lancer a really tricky card to play around, because your opponent won't know what Lancer is stealing when it starts to resolve. And if it does resolve, then they won't get the opportunity to even use their monster as a graveyard resource, as it'll be safely tucked away beneath Lancer. And as a really nice bonus, this effect triggers whenever any of your monsters gets equipped with something, which can be great if you want to use your armored cards to buff your Xyz, or if your main engine happens to natively equip cards during both players' turns anyways. Every one of its effects is incredible, but if you had to make Lancer normally, no deck would ever summon it because it requires a huge resource sink of 3 level 7 monsters. But thankfully, its alternative summon condition gives the card a huge buff, as you can just summon it on top of any of your rank 5 or 6 monsters. And Xyz Armor Fortress is without a doubt your best option. You wouldn't think so at first, given that Fortress actually has a restriction on when it can be used as material, since if it has any material of its own, you can't use it for any kind of Xyz summon, and including the summon of Lancer. Thankfully, Armor Fortress has a way to natively detach materials on an amazing effect that ties the entire engine together, because by detaching up to 2 materials, you get to add any Armor Xyz cards from your deck to your hand, up to the number of materials you detach, with the only caveat being the cards you add need to have different names from one another. It even has a bonus effect too while it's treated as an equip card, which doubles any battle damage your opponent takes while the monster it's equipped to battles another monster, which can make it a pretty great OTK option once it's an equip card. But of course, the most amazing aspect of Fortress is that it's an amazing way of bridging into whatever you need from the armored package. And this effect is especially potent due to Fortress's alternative summon condition, which lets you bring it up by using a rank 3 or rank 4 monster as a material. This makes the armored package effortless to go into. Whether your Xyz monster was negated, or you just had a stray rank 3 or 4 body on field, you'll always have Armor Fortress waiting for you in your extra deck as either a plan B option, or as a way to add an extra layer to an already established end board. Now, you do have to keep Armored Fortress's restriction in mind whenever you do this, because if you can't detach enough materials from it, then it can make summoning out Lancer on top a lot more awkward. But creative deck builders have found a ton of really interesting solutions for this that will often change how the package is used in their strategy. Some decks, for example, will just bring out a rank 3 or 4 Xyz monster that, at some point during their combo, is guaranteed to have 0 materials. Whether that's an Armor Torpedo in rank 3 decks, or an Infernal Flame Banshee that's been brought back from banishment in a deck like Ascended, which will leave Fortress with only 1 material you can detach to search. Meanwhile, decks like Goblin can natively detach materials from monsters, so even if they end up breaking really badly and drawing all their potential search targets, they can just get rid of those materials when they combo off. And of course, some strategies like Sharks will instead play multiple search targets for Fortress. So, because if you summon out a Bahamut Shark, detach 1 for its effect, and overlay Fortress on top, it'll have 2 materials. This would be an issue if you were only on 1 search target. But if these strategies play 2 potential targets, then they can simply just detach 2 to search them both out. And thankfully, there are 2 great search targets currently released in the TCG, with 2 more really interesting options on their way. But the common feature between every main deck armored card that a fortress could search is that they all equip cards to monsters in some way. This gives you ample opportunities to trigger the removal effects of Dark Knight Lancer, while also letting you take advantage of the powerful equip card effects like Fortress and Torpedo have. And these cards all do this in fun and different ways. But the best of the bunch is definitely full Armored Xyz. With full Armored Xyz, you can banish it from your graveyard to equip an Xyz monster on your side of the field with another Xyz monster that's on side of your field or in your graveyard, turning it into an equipped spell. And the effects that this new equipped spell gains from the full armored are pretty notable too. Firstly, it'll cause the equipped monster to gain attack equal to the attack of the monster equipped to it. And secondly, if the equipped Xyz would be destroyed, you can destroy the equipped card instead. These are great for keeping your favorite Xyz around. The destruction substitution can ensure the survivability of your Xyz against common pops and board breakers, and the attack gain provided is more than substantial. Even equipping a monster with low attack to your Dark Knight Lancer gives you the chance to reach over 4,000 attack, making it so all but the strongest of beat sticks in the game are gonna be able to beat over it, all the while making OTKing a lot easier on the next turn, especially if you happen to have equipped Armored Fortress. But even without these effects, full Armored Xyz would still be an astounding tool since its effect to equip is natively a quick effect due to being a trap card. This is amazing for a number of reasons. It allows you to save your monsters from destruction by chaining full armored in response to a pop, or you could surprise an opponent during the battle phase by massively increasing the attack of your Xyz at the last moment. But more than anything, the most important part of full armored is that it equips at quick effect speed, which can trigger Dark Knight Lancer's removal effect during either player's turn, making it a real piece of interaction. Without this being a quick effect, you'd have to jump through a lot of hoops to equip a card to one of your monsters during your opponent's turn, which would have made this engine a lot more awkward. Thankfully though, with full armored, all you have to do is get it to the graveyard in some way, and that's a simple matter due to full armored's on-field effect. All it does is allow you to Xyz summon a monster, with the only condition being that you already need to control an Xyz monster to activate it. And it just so happens that Dark Knight Lancer's alternative summon condition is also treated as an Xyz summon. So, to get full armored into your graveyard, you need to have activated while you can Xyz summon a monster. Usually, this means the deck using the engine will end on Armored Fortress, so they can Xyz summon Lancer with full armored and get it to the graveyard. But that's not the extent of what full armored can be used for, as you could just summon out Lancer during your own turn, and then use an Xyz summon something else during your opponent's turn. For some decks, such as Goblin, it's not uncommon to see Lancer summon during their turn, so that on your opponent's turn, they can summon out 2 level 3s using the quick effect as an overlay for an extra piece of interaction, and in some cases, you could potentially summon out either a Zeus or a Typhon during your opponent's turn, so long as their conditions have been met, which can be game warping if your opponent doesn't see it coming. All of this combined makes full armored unquestionably the most useful target you can grab from a Fortress card. And if you're planning on playing the engine, it's the one that you usually need to include more than anything else. But if you're planning on playing multiple targets for Fortress, then at the moment your only other option is Armored Xyz. Much like full Armored's graveyard effect, Armored Xyz effects lets you equip a monster you control with an Xyz, but with a few key differences. You can use Armored on any Xyz monster, not just an Xyz, but you can only equip it with an Xyz from the graveyard, and the effects that regular Armored gives that's equipped are a lot different from the ones full Armored gives. Instead of increasing attack, Armored Xyz changes the attack to the attack of the equipped card. So if you equip an Armored Torpedo to a Lancer, its attack will become 2500. Not only that, but the attribute on your field of the monster will become the equipped card's original attribute, and last but not least, if that monster attacks, you can send its equipped card to the graveyard so it can make a second attack. Now in comparison to its trap card counterpart, Armored Xyz equip is definitely a lot worse since it's not a quick effect, so you'll only be able to use its trigger on a Dark Knight Lancer during the main phase of your turn if you're using it. And by all means, it's still a solid path to Lancer's effect, but it's a lot less valuable since it doesn't represent kind of disruption that full armor does. Although if you need to play Armored Xyz in order to ensure you can detach 2 from Fortress, it at least makes for an excellent OTK enabler. You can increase the attack of one of your smaller monsters so that you can get some more damage in by using a spent Xyz. Or alternatively, you could just equip it to your highest attack monster. Its attack might be lowered for its first attack, but when you use the equipped spell's third effect, the equipped card gets sent to the graveyard so your monster's attack will return to normal, allowing you to get in for likely more than lethal damage on your second time around. And unlike full Armored, Armored doesn't banish itself from the grave to use its effect, so you can recycle it pretty easily with Lancer's effect to use it multiple times over the course of a duel. Although for the most part, Armored Xyz definitely isn't the best card in the engine, but it is at least strong enough to be a decent secondary search. Although with the recent release of Reincarnate Unveil Mail, you might be tempted to play it above Armored Xyz instead in certain strategies. Unveil Mail isn't necessarily an immediate upgrade to Armored Xyz. Like Armored, it also isn't really a disruption, and its main use is in helping potential OTKs with its second effect that allows you to actually summon a Water Xyz if the equipped monster battles, which can let you go on from a Fortress to a Lancer during the battle phase, representing at over 5,000 life point damage combined. But Unveil Mail has a slight edge over Armor Xyz because it provides a better layer protection to an Xyz monster it's equipped to by giving it an effect that prevents it from being destroyed by battle, which can give you the chance to protect your most important monsters from being beaten over. Mail even recurs itself every turn too, because during the end phase of the turn that it was sent to the graveyard, you can equip it to an Xyz you control. This can theoretically help you trigger a Dark Knight Lancer during your opponent's turn, but it's definitely a lot more limited than a full armored. Unveil Mail definitely isn't revolutionizing how the armored engine is going to be used, but it's a nice alternative option that does something slightly different, and more options are always welcome. Armored Shark, however, is more limited in its use. Its on-field effect lets you send a Water Xyz from your X deck to the graveyard so that you can summon out a fish monster in your grave with the same level as the rank of the Xyz monster you sent, which theoretically can make it a decent way to extend by using your graveyard resources. And its graveyard effect is just as solid. As a quick effect speed, you get to equip it to a Water Xyz monster you control, and it'll grant it a free bonus 500 attack. But the main issue with Armored Shark is that it's a lot more difficult to use compared to a card like Full Armored. It doesn't have a way to summon itself to the field, and isn't really something you want to spend your normal summon on. Even in something like Sharks, since they'd much rather start the turn by bringing out a Buzzsaw, especially because Armored is a level 3 with no way to level modulate, which goes against the rank 4 focus of Sharks. And because it's hard to get on field, it's also hard to get to the graveyard, and you have to jump through a couple of hoops to discard with the likes of Fishborg Harpooner if you want to use it as an alternative to Full Armored. Still, no matter your preferences, each of these armored cards existing increases the strength of Fortress by widening its versatility by giving you the choice between a number of different options depending on both your deck list and what you need in any given situation. And the same is also technically true of a card like Xyz Entrust, a normal spell that lets you search for an Armored Xyz card, much like Fortress, but it also comes with a couple of bonus effects to differentiate it. After adding with Entrust, you can make all monsters you control become either level 3 or 5 for the rest of the turn. And it even has a graveyard effect that can special summon one of your Xyz monsters that's being treated like an equip card on a different turn to being sent to the graveyard. Unfortunately, however, it just isn't a reliable card. You see, while each of the armored cards we're talking about all have their niche to fill, most decks usually don't play a density of them, since they're cards that you'd only want to have in hand after you've already got the engine necessary to use them. When you search with Fortress, you already have a rank 5 for Dark Knight Lancer to rank up on, and you'll likely have an Xyz Engrave ready to be attached. So no matter what, you're gonna get some value when you add. However, with Entrust, you're not guaranteed that same setup when you activate it, which makes it so that most of the armored cards you could add aren't really doing much unless you're already comboing off anyways. And while its bonus effects are cute, they don't do enough to justify running the card when you already have a great bridge to the engine waiting in your extra deck that's incredibly easy to access. But if you're looking for an Xyz to make summoning Fortress even easier, Xyz Armor Torpedo is a great choice. Torpedo is a rank 3 that can be made with any 2 level 3 monsters, and is currently the armor card with the lowest rank out of all of them, so it doesn't have any kind of alternative summoning addition, and its effect as a monster is simple but strong. It can't attack if it has no materials, but if it has 2 materials, you can detach both of them to draw a card. Now, this effect is basic because that's all it needs to be. Getting a draw is a great bonus that can net you some free card advantage. But the most important part about Torpedo is that it detaches too, leaving it with 0 materials. So by the time you summon Fortress on top, the only material it'll have will be Torpedo. This enables you to just play 1 armored card in your main deck, since you'll only need to detach 1 from Fortress so it can be used as a material, which makes it a great way of utilizing the armored engine without forcing yourself to play too many bricks. And that's not where Torpedo's utility ends either, because as an equipped spell, it also applies 2 different effects no matter what it's equipped by. With it equipped, your opponent won't be able to activate cards if the equipped monster battles, and it'll also negate your opponent's monsters during that same battle. Meanwhile, its second effect prevents your opponent from targeting your Xyz with any kind of card effect. These are some really nice extras to have, and make the Xyz monster Torpedo's equipped too even more difficult to deal with. Because while a Lancer equipped with a Torpedo via full armored isn't quite a full towers, having a monster with over 5,000 attack that can't be targeted by card effects will negate your opponent's monsters that it battles, and will even protect it from destruction once is close enough. Despite this, Armor Torpedo definitely isn't a mandatory inclusion, since you have a lot of different options to bring a fortress out on top. But if you're playing a strategy that can commit to rank 3s, it's more than worth playing as a way to start off your plays. Now, in terms of the main armor line, we've covered the cards that most decks are generally willing to play to enable the package. But there are other full armors that, in specific strategies, can be played to enable an even more expansive package. Full Armored Black Ray Lancer, Full Armored Crystal Zero Lancer, and Full Armored Utopic Ray Lancer are all Xyz with individually okay effects, but can be invaluable due to their ability to rank up on an appropriate monster. For Black Ray Lancer, you could absolutely summon it on top of an Xyz Armor Torpedo if you wanted to search for 2 on Fortress while drawing a card with Torpedo. But more commonly, you'll see Black Ray Lancer used in Sharks as an easy rank 4 you can throw down on a rank 3 summoned by Bahamut to enable a Utopic Draco future. Likewise, you'll see Full Armored Crystal Zero Lancer in Sharks specifically because you can summon it on top of an Xyz Armor Fortress and then put a Dark Knight Lancer on top of it so it'll have 2 materials. This is really important because if you start on your turn with a Buzzsaw bringing down Remora from your deck, you'll need at least 2 materials on Xyz monster you control to detach from Remora after adding it back with Lancer's effect, which Crystal Zero ensures, giving you the chance to extend even further. And last but not least, Full Armored Utopic Ray Lancer can be summoned on top of any rank 4 lower monster you control if you discard a spell or trap card. And this is powerful because Sharks summon out Dark Knight Lancer during their own turn, so it can be somewhat difficult to get full armor to the graveyard. However, Utopic Ray Lancer can get it there in 2 different ways. You can either use full armor to Xyz summon a Utopic Ray on top of a spent Xyz during your opponent's turn to ensure your Lancer is online, or you can summon it on your own turn by pitching it for its summon. Overall though, the Armored Engine sets a great example for engines of the modern era. It's clearly at its strongest when played within Sharks, the deck that it was meant for, but has its place in several different strategies and gives a boost to all kinds of different decks that are willing to play a brick or 2 to enable it. So if you haven't yet, it's worth playing out the engine in your favorite rogue deck, as it might just end up being the knight in shining armor that saves your strategy from table 500.